Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Peah Pelig Vav Halacha Gimel. We are learning today Daf Nun Gimel. We're starting Mamish on top of the Amid. The Gemara is going to give a source for the Mishnah's initial ruling that Shikha does not apply to Rashi Shurais, and as we will elaborate in the source, that this applies both to Shikha's Kama and to Shikha's Omer, as we'll speak out. The Gemara then will give more elaboration on the second case that the Mishnah told us, where Shikha does not apply, and that is the case of Ha'omer Shekenegdoi Moichiach. Actually, at the end of yesterday's shir, we brought up a question. Basically, if there was a Omer Shekenegdoi Moichiach initially, which is why the one that you technically forgot, halachically, is not included in Shikha. What happens if you actually forgot it later? And at a later point, there is no more the Omer Shekenegdoi Moichiach. This question is going to be resolved by a sugya that we learned already before, as we'll go through the topic. And we're going to finally come to two very interesting inquiries based on the rule that if a person forgets 3 oymarim or more, it's not going to be shikha, as we already spoke out, because a row consists of, not lebei shamai, but the way we paskin, of 3 oymarim or more. And even if it's in another row, the fact that it's 3, which is halachically a row for itself, if a person forgets an entire row, it's not shikha. So Bekit said, if you forget 3, it's not shikha. Shikha is only shaykh if you forget 1 or 2 such sheaves. And we're going to have 2 very interesting cases where there's going to be a half of a third, the inside half, an outside half, an upper half, a lower half, a tzad elyon, a tzad tachton, and these boys will not be resolved. But me'ingen le'ingen mamash, we're going to go to a completely different topic. We're going to go to the din of Egla Rufa, which is something that we learned about in Bavli and Masechta Soita and in other places. And there also we're going to have a tzad elyon, tzad tachton discussion with the story of Rav, with Eliyahu Hanavi v'chulei, and without any further ado, let's start Chevron Daf Nun Gimel Amid Aleph all the way on top of the Amid. The Mishnah gave the 3 exceptions where everyone is Maida, Bein Bei Shammai, Bein Bei Hillel, that the law of Shikha does not apply, and the first of the 3 is Rashi Shurais. And as we explained, Rashi Hashurais means both the sheaf at the beginning of a row. So when you begin to harvest this row, you don't begin on sheaf A, you begin in sheaf B. That's not called forgetting. That's forgetting. You started after it. You were not going towards it and you forgot it. Rashi Shurais, as we learned, also includes the final sheaf in the row. If it's 1 row, it's the last one of this row. If there are many rows, the final means the final of the last row. And there the logic is that when the Torah speaks about shikha, the Torah actually, it's a lav. The lav is loisashuv lekachtoi. Don't return. Returning is only shaykh if you were at a place, you bypassed it, you went further. Now you have the option of returning, and the Torah tells you don't return. If you ended before the final sheaf, then you never bypassed it. You just ended before it, and therefore it's not shaykh for Hashem to tell you don't return. You were never there for you to be told not to return. It's also not included in Shikha, and therefore, yes, you can take it. In other words, it belongs to the Balabais. Okay. When we learned the Mishnah, as when we just gave our quick Chazara of Rashi Shurais, we spoke about sheaves, which is correct. And that is what we call Shikchas Omer. There is the same when it comes to Shikchas Kama. That means when you have standing grain and you are about to harvest it. And again, the Rashi Ashuris would mean that if instead of you beginning in the beginning of a row to harvest, you walk by the first patch, you only begin patch number 2, patch B, there also, patch A is not included in Shikha. And similarly, when you came to the end of the final row, to the final patch, and if you didn't do it because you forgot to do it, you are allowed to do it. It's not included in Shikha. So Amar Rabbi Yoina, Ksiv, it says, and if you want, you can look inside the Torah Oir HaSholem just to follow along. Let's say the entire pasuk in Kiseitze, that's referring to Shekha. Kisikzoid, Kitzircha, Bisodecha. Now, by the way, Kisikzoid obviously is referring to Shikchas Kama. You are beginning to harvest. Vishachachta. And then the Torah says, Oimer, that's explicit Shikchas Oimer, Basada, Loisashub Lakachtoi. Norvas then, Laged, Layosim, Belamana Yia, Laman Yeberecha Hashem Alekecha, B'choil, Ma'asei Yodecha. That's the pasuk. So says Rabbi Yoina, when it says Kisiksiksikha B'Sadecha, let's now read the next word, Vishachachta, together with the Kisiksikha. In other words, Masha Ato Koitzen, Ato Shecheyach. It's only shaykh to forget that when you already began to harvest. If you didn't even begin to harvest, which is meaning you didn't harvest the first patch. You didn't begin yet. It's not shaykh to have shikha. In other words, that will be the source which will exempt by shikchas kama the Rashi Ashurais in the beginning of the row. In the beginning, the first patch. Ad kedoin Rashi Shurais kama. And now we have different girsa'os, and we will follow the girsa soif shurais oimarim. Interesting, huh? We're not being kama oimer oimer. No, the pasuk is actually speaking about the rois shurais of kama. The source for the end, for the final, is only by oimer. So soif shurais oimarim. Where do we have over there the source? So weiter Amar Rabbi Yoina, as we just spoke out. When the pasuk says "Lo yisashuv lekachtoi," that implies that mimakoyme should basa. If you were at a place, don't return to that place. If you never made it all the way to the end, meaning you were never there, not shaykh to say, don't return there. Mimakoyme should basa lo yisashuv lekachtoi. So that will be a source that will exempt the soif shura of the oimer from shikha. And now the Gemara says, "Ad kedoin." Rashi Shurais Kama will be the Gersa. And Soif Shurais Oimarim, we have a source. But what about the Rashi Shurais Imarim? And or the Soif Shurais Kama, how do we know that they are also exempt from Shikha? So Amar Rabbi Yoina, since the pasuk alludes to both Shikchas Kama and to Shikchas Oimer in the same verse, so Ramakish one to the other. Nelev Rashurais Imarim. Miroy Shurais Kama and Misoif Shurais Kama, Misoif Shuras Aimarim Atkan, the first limud, quite simple. Okay, now we are moving on to the second case of the Mishnah. Second case of the Mishnah is Ha'omer Shekenegdoi Mochiach. So Ha'omer that you forgot, an uncollected Omer. But Shekenegdoi means who's adjacent sheaves. Moichiach means not that they demonstrate that you did not forget it. It demonstrates that lav dafka you forgot it. There is some hoichacha that confuses, that makes it unclear whether it was forgotten or not. Quickly reviewing. So when you have, let's say, 100 oimarim, you have 10 rows. Each row has 10 oimarim, and you're collecting all of them. And you are going in the direction of north-south. Or you're going from milmaila lamata, you're going from up down. Number one, number two, number three. When you come to the 10th, row A, the last 10, you forget. And since you have row 2, right, you have row B and you have row C, so we said that's not the soif shura. Soif shura is only the final. The one that you forgot was not the final. Narvas then, if a person is looking at that field, what might they think? That maybe when you came to number 10, you will no longer, you don't plan to continue to harvest milmaila lamata. Maybe now you're going to go from side to side. And going from side to side, then the one that you forgot is the beginning of a row. And even if you're going in the other direction, if this will be the last one you will harvest because it's all the way in the bottom, then this will be the final one. So it's either the one that you forgot to harvest, or it's the beginning of a row that you didn't begin to harvest, or it's at the end of the final row that you did not even get to. You don't know that. That's the pshat moichiach, and therefore it's exempt from shikha. And yes, the owner gets to keep it. It belongs to the balabayis. Now the Gemara is going to quote a Braisa. Says the Braisa, that's the case that we just spoke out. You have 10 rows. Each row has 10 sheets that you plan to collect. And and you begin by collecting the first row. And the direction you choose to collect in is north, south, or let's say we're going from top to bottom. And when we say achad mehem, we are referring to the last one. And even though I know we learned in the Mishnah itself, could be you forgot the last two. I know, but the Braisa speaks about you forgot the last one. So if we're going to give numbers, if we're going to give letters to the rows, row number 1 is 8. Every sheaf has a number. So you forgot 810. So no shikha, because we said because nidoin means not for sure. The mochiach, the adjacent is that if you look from the direction east-west, it's the beginning of a new row. None of that row was harvested yet, and therefore it's exempted. It's excluded from shekha. And mamish the kasha that I think Rav Shlomo brought up yesterday, right? And the Rabbi had an opinion. That's now the kasha the Gemara is going to ask. Okay, so when you forgot it, when you forgot 810, that's the oimer shekeneg the mechiach. It was excluded. Says the Gemara, what happens? Now we're moving on. This is not the Braisa. What happens if now you are actually you chose to change the direction, and at this point, you began collecting from the opposite side of the field. I want to explain something over here. That if you went from top bottom, if someone can show a picture, maybe I think the Rabbi is showing a picture that will be helpful. So you went, just imagine you have a square, right? 10 and 10. There's 100 sheets. You are starting on the left side, the top left corner, and you're working your way down, and you forgot the last one. That's the 810. And you taka now change directions. But what direction are you going in? You are beginning to go in the direction of from east to west. If you would forget J10, by the way, that would be Rashi Shurais. That would also not be Shekha. But that's not the kasha of the Gemara. You harvested J10, and you came to what we call the A10. Again, that's the end of the shura. That's the end of the line, and you forgot it again. Over here, my friend, it's not the final one. It's not the final one because after you went and you did the lowest line from east to west, you're going to go now one line above it from east to west, and then the third line above it. That means you harvested row 10. And then if you have the picture, then you plan to go from there to row 9, and you plan to go to row 8. So the 810 that you forgot now at the second time is not the final one. It's not going to be exempted from the first Rashi Shurai's case of the Mishnah. First time it was exempted. That means it was not shikha. But now the second time around, you taka forgot it. That's kakashem. So ma'u sheyasa shikha. As the marafulda. Let's read the marafulda, the last one on the amid. Me name, right, 5 lines from the bottom, do we say that hoyel vikfar nishkach b'rishoina, since you forgot it when you were going north-south. And the halacha said, v'loy nasa oshikha, because shu nidoin misrechamayde. Because, like we said, when you look at it, if you look at it as the one in the north-south, you forgot it. But mitzad, if you were now to change directions, when you're going now, if you were to go from east-west, very beautiful picture. If you're going from east to west, then you didn't even get to that row yet. And because of that, halachically, it's not shikha. Now that you began second row of the worker or of the balabas was not row B. Now you're going from east to west, not west-east. This is important. Because if you were to go from west-east, then A10 is Rashi Shurais. But if you choose now to go J10, and then you went I10, and then you went H10, Then you went G10. In other words, you're going on the lowest row from Dafka, from east to west. In this scenario, A10, right? The A10 is not the final one, because after this one, you are going to go to row 9. J, I, H, G, F, E, D, v'chulei. We're in the Marav folder. With the second time around, it's not included. It's not Rashi Ashuros. It's not Omer Shekineg the Mechiach. Maybe one side of this inquiry is that it's not going to be Shikha. Since the first time around when you forgot it, halachically it's not forgetting. So it was excluded from Shikha. It will never again be included in Shikha. That's one side. Mamash, what we asked yesterday. So what? That it wasn't forgotten the first time. Now you forgot it, and maybe it should be Shikha. That's the Gemara's Baya. Turning to Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis. And the resolution that the Gemara will give is based on two braises that we already learned, Mamash, recently on Daf Mem Dalid. And the Gemara's premise is not to make a machlokas Tanoim. We resolve what appears to be a differences in Tanoim, as each brayse is speaking about a different scenario. And mamish, the way this Gemara was used above for the topic over there, same will be for the topic over here. Whoever remembers, and on some level we all remember, this is going to be a very easy, conclusive proof, which will resolve this way. So answers the Gemara, I can resolve this inquiry from the following discussion, and that is, you have one row. The whole thing is only one row. And on the row you went, you gathered bundle A and bundle B and bundle C, right? A, 1, 2, 3, 4 you forgot. You moved on to 5. And the question is, what is the pshat you moved on to 5? When you moved on to 5, obviously that is where we kick in the lab, number 4, because you already moved on. Now you have to return. Doesn't mean you stepped away. Doesn't mean 2 amas, 4 amas. It doesn't work that way. Problem is that we don't have a consistency. Option number 1 is that you actually gathered 5. You picked up the 5th, which is what it says in one brayse, which implies that if I moved away from number 4, even if my back is towards number 4, and if I chapta shmuz with my chaver, and it took me an hour, as long as I did not physically pick up number 5, halachically, I didn't really move away from number 4 because I didn't begin the next step. The other brayse says, no, it's a time factor. It's not as makom factor, it's a zman factor. If I moved away from number 4 and I had enough time to gather 5, even if I didn't, that is pshat, I moved away from number 4. And like we learned above, it's not a machlokas tanoim. Let's read it inside. Question is, when do we kick in the lab of leisashim lekachtoi? And indeed, what's the two opinions? Is tanoi tanei? In some braises, we learned that when may you not return to the 4th, only when you physically gathered the 5th. Im not lasachamishi, then the 4th becomes shikha, implying that if you didn't physically pick up the 5th, even though you lingered, doesn't matter. You didn't really move away from the 4th. On the other hand, the East Tanoi, another Tanoim, another Braisos we learned, Im Shal Litalas Chamishi, it's a time factor. If you waited the time that it would take you without rush, going at the same speed that you took Rishon, Sheni, and Shlishi, Hadehi Shikha, then the 4th becomes Shikha, even if you didn't physically take the 5th. And not to make it into a machlokes, Amar Rabbi Bon Bar Chiyam. That what? That man, the Aman Notalas Chamishi, the case, it's not the Tana, no, it's all the Tanoim are of the same opinion. Those Tanoim who spoke out the case that Shikha of Revi is only when you took the Chamishi, they were speaking about a scenario, that there was actually a 6th. What's the magic of a 6th? Because you forgot the 4th. And like we mentioned, that 3 has a din of a row. Even if they are part of a larger row, they have a din of a row. And there's no Shikha when it comes to an entire row. Or as the way we have been wording it until now, if you forget 3 whether it's patches, whether it's aymanim, it doesn't have the din of shikha. So if you forgot the fourth, you cannot declare the fourth shikha. Why not? Because maybe you'll forget the fifth, maybe you'll forget the sixth. There are two others other than the fourth. There isn't only a chamishi, there's also a shishi. When can we establish that the fourth is not shikha? When you picked up the fifth. When you pick up the fifth. Now there isn't three to forget. There might be a second one, even if it would have been adjacent, it would have been shikha, kol shchein, that it's not adjacent. Okay, and that will be the raya. We'll come back to it in a moment. However, the Braisa that only spoke about a shehiyah in zman, not necessitating you to actually pick up the fifth, that's where in that row where you picked up the first and the second and the third and you forgot the fourth, there isn't a sixth. There isn't a sixth. So now we simply have a question, which is leisashav lakachti means you bypassed it, what's called bypassing it. So the Braisa wants to let you know it's not just about you moving on and your back is towards the fourth, but if that sounded like Mayim, even though it came from Rabbi Naftali's, that was amazing. Okay. So the kid said that so the okay, that's the chiddush, that it's not about physically moving on. There is a certain time factor, and if the time did not even pass, it doesn't matter that your back is towards the fourth. It's not, you didn't really move away from it, but coming back over here, what's the raya? The Gemara is going to speak it out. The raya is from the first Braisa, and the way we had it before. Okay, let's go to the first Braisa's case where you have six. Okay, so you bypass the fourth and you lingered this man. So why isn't it shikha? Because it's like another exception. It's very similar to our Mishnah, because you might end up forgetting the fifth and the sixth. In other words, you forgot it the first time. At that moment, it's not shikha. If we're going to go with the side that when something could have been shikha was excluded within shikha, it can never become shikha again, so that it should never be shikha. Was it not exempted from the potential of it being a shura? A shura means three, which is what we're explaining, and yet we are arguing it was taka initially exempted because of the din of a shura. But if later some other event happened, which is in our case, you picked up the fifth, it will become shikha. Yet va'at omar, it does become shikha. So v'hache here also shikha. If you went ahead in the case of the inquiry, and the worker or the balabas, they went from east to west, and they began with the lowest row, number 10, and the chacham, they picked up J and I and H and G and F and E and D and C and B, but forgot A. Yes, it's shikha. I forgot what the Gabbai said yesterday. Is that what you said yesterday, Danny? That's the answer of the Gemara.
That is what I said yesterday.
There we go. It's exactly what the Gabbai said yesterday. All right. Now I stand my ground that the Gemara could have proved it also from.
No, I made a difference between the other Mishnah that we learned where he left it dafka next to a wall or something like that, which was, I said, that's indicative that you're planning on coming back to get it, which is very different. Meaning you were making a comparison, and that was also the double forgetting. Meaning he didn't forget it when he harvested, but he forgot it later when he was on the way to the city. You were comparing that, I think, to this. I said, I don't think it's necessarily the same, because here, you know, the initial time he forgot it, we didn't know if he forgot it because it was considered the head of a row or the end of a row. Now the fact that he continued harvesting and he left it, we clearly see that he forgot it. I think that was
no, actually, that's why I spoke to the case that the inquiry. It doesn't matter. I spoke to the case that he began J10. So he mamish forgot it twice. Okay, anyways, be it that way, yes, it's shikha. Now, my friends, I don't know why the art school didn't make pictures, but I made pictures. So you're stuck with my beautiful art. We have really a very simple inquiry, but without a picture, it's hard to chop it. I really hope the oilim can see it. Let me do this. Let me say it by heart. And this is Mamish Gaval. So I hope this is good. you're going from what we are calling north to south, or milmaila lamata, right? You have a row over here of 7. That's the case. There's a row of 7. You picked up the first, you picked up the 7, you picked up the third. The case that the Gemara is speaking about is where number 4 is very big. And I know that we learned that there is a certain tusa'a, it's excluded from shikha. I know that. We learned maybe a 4-to-1 ratio. We're not going into that. It's very big, but it's not that big. It happens to be very big. What happened here is that the worker picked up half of 4. It was huge. So he gathered half of 4 and he forgot the other half. Not only did he forget the other half, he was planning to pick up half and then to pick up the other half. You know, he has a truck, so he's used to picking up 2 pounds, 5 pounds. Picked up, it was a big bundle. He picked up half. He undid it. Then he's going to pick up the other half. He not only did he forget the half of 4, he forgot 5 and 6, and then he picked up 7. You know, I'm dafka giving a 7 to make it clear that it's not the end of a shura. It's not going to be excluded from the cases of the Mishnah. If there is any exclusion, it's the exclusion of shura, which we just mentioned, which means that if you forget 3, it's not shekha. So, in other words, he forgot 5, Mendel. He forgot 6. The 4, he forgot half. It's not a whole thing. So, does the half of the 4, does it halachically stand on its own ground, and therefore it and 5 and 6 makes all 3 a shura and none of them are shekha? Or he didn't forget 4, or I'll tell you even better. Now, just to get the words, that's why you need a picture. I don't know if you can read it. Maybe it comes out backwards. I'm calling the top of 4 the chitzain and the bottom of the 4 the pnimi. And what the Gemara is going to say is that there's no doubt that if the worker picked up 1, 2, 3, and he picked up the chitzain, he picked up the top half, which means what he left, what the Gemara calls the pnimi, is adjacent 5. There is no hefsek. Since the size of the pnimi now is exactly the size of 5 and 6, as it was the size of 1, 2, and 3, it's considered a shura, and it's called forgetting. That's not the inquiry, just because he divided it in half. It's not shikha because it's called a shura, because it's 3. The question of the Gemara, which is unresolved, is that this genius, he picked up 1, 2, 3, and the pnimi, then he forgot 5 and 6, and he picked up 7. Physically, there is no hefsek because he picked up the pnimi. But since the chitzain wasn't initially adjacent to 5 and 6, it was the higher part of 4, maybe it's not called connected. And if it's not connected, it's not included in the exemption of shura. I'm going to use this again in a second. Okay, let's read it inside. And we're going to give it number 4. And imer tzad chitzain, again, imer tzad chitzain means if he collected the higher part, he collected the part that's near 3, and then he left not only the pnimi, but also 5 and 6. So for sure, betzad hapnimi nidon keshura, and therefore it belongs to the balabas. The lower part of 4 and 5 and 6. Why? Because you forgot 3. It's called a row. It's called a shura. The boy of the Gemara, Imer Tzad Hapnimi, for whatever reason, he looked at the bundle. It's too big. He's not taking the whole bundle. He divided it into half. He picked up the pnimi first, and now he forgot the chitzain, and he forgot 5, and he forgot 6. But you can't say that the chitzain vadai should be a shura with 5 and 6 because of the hefsek. Okay. So now b'tzad hachitzain ma'u sheyidain, does it make a shura with the 5 and 6 that you forgot? That is inquiry number 1. I hope that was clear. See, with the illustration, it's clear. Now, similar case, and I'll use this again. I know it's a little bit of a stretch. Doesn't matter. It's the concept. You picked up 1, 2, and 3. when the person saw the size of war, that's just the case. It was so big, he divided it into half. But instead of doing it chitzon pnimi, the way we're explaining it, it means on the ground, you divide it into half. One half closer to the north, one half closer to the south. You cut it in the half of its height. Leaving the elyon would mean, the way they all point out, is that you had on the ground some sort of wooden board, wooden something. You created quickly some sort of support system in which the higher half is still sitting. It's not sitting on the ground anymore. And you took out the bottom one, or you took up the top half, which is normal, and you forgot the bottom half. Now, let me just say it again by heart. If you picked up the elyon, what you left was on the ground, then that for sure will be mitzdaref with 5 and 6 to make a shura. Why would it not be? I don't care if it's not the same size. It's all on the ground. But if you picked up the tachton, the tzad tachton, you left the elyon, I know it's not suspended in the air, but it's on some sort of something stand, maybe, again, that removes it from the din of a shura. That makes a lot of sense. It's not on the ground. Let's read it inside. If you picked up the half that's above, so the footprint of the tachton 4 is bigger, that no one cares. They're all on the ground. So betzad ha-tachton, interesting expression, together with number 5 and 6, for sure, nidam keshura. Question is, imod ha-tachton, for whatever reason, you picked up the bottom half, obviously suspending the top half on something, but it's not on the ground. And not only did you now not go back to take that suspended part, but you forgot to take 5 and 6 as well. Yeah, you went on to 7. Now, Ma'oshidin Kishura. And what will be the logic for it not to be a shura? Because it's not on the ground. Because of this inquiry of tzad elyon, tzad tachton, we're going to move me'inyan le'inyan completely. We're going to go to a whole different topic. And let me just share a few words of introduction. There's a beautiful message. It's a little bit of a shtickle. It's an agadah together with the divrei halacha. But let's speak about the divrei halacha. We all know the din of egla rufa. It's explicit in the Torah Parsha Shoftim that if a person is found murdered outside a city, and remember, outside the city, number one. Number two, we don't know who killed him. If we know who killed the person, then none of this is included in what we're talking about. No, someone is found outside a city, and we don't know who killed him. So there's a special din that you have to have dafke representatives of the Sanhedrin that they have to come to the corpse and they have to measure from the corpse to the closest city. And so I know Yerushalmi, there are certain cities that are not included in the din of egla rufa, and we have that whole machloikas. You measure from the nose, you measure from the belly button. We're not getting into that part. From some part of the corpse, whichever shita you'll follow, you have to physically measure, and the closest city will be on some level held responsible, and part of their kapara is it's on them, on that closest city, to bring what we call the egla rufa. That's enough information just for a basic rule of egla rufa. The question, that the halachic question is, what happens if, God forbid, there are two murdered corpses, one is on top of the other, tzad elyon, tzad tachton. And let's say we measure from the nose. Let's go with that. When you measure from the elyon, the city A is the closest city. You also have to measure from the tachton. You measure from the tachton, city B is the closest city. Question is, which city has to bring, or maybe both. Now, over there, here by Shikha, a row, it's more like a svara. If there's a hefsik, chitzon pnimi, elyon tachton, it's not on the ground. There, it's not just a svara. There are halachas that if a person is found murdered, but they are covered, there's no din of egla rufa. The Torah says, basada, right? You find the corpse basada, which Chazal understand to be on the field, not in the field, on the field, meaning if you're floating in the air above the field, if a corpse is found on top of a box, on top of a field, it's also excluded from the din of egla rufa. So just for the record, it's shayich that in the case that we gave, there will be no din of egla rufa, because it's called tamun and it's called saf. Okay, so let now shelve the halachas, and now just say like this, that the great Ben Azai had such clarity in his Torah knowledge that in as much as we have the general rule, only ask your Rebbe kasha if you know that your Rebbe is learning in that sugya. if he's in that topic before Pesach, you ask a shayla in Hilchas Pesach. To go ahead and to ask someone a question, if that Pesach is not asuk ba'osa inyan, then you might be ashaming him. There are certain people that mastered the Torah to the level, like Ben Azai, the Shuk Tferia. He used to go sometimes to the Shuk, and he would say that you can ask me any question that you want. That was the greatness of Ben Azai. Says the Gemara that Rav, one time, we know Rav began in the Holy Land. He became later the leader in Surah. But Rav, Kad, Nochas, Letaman, don't forget, now we're learning Talmud Yerushalmi. So Talmud Yerushalmi is like in the younger years of Rav, when Rav was in the Holy Land. One time he went to visit over there, he went to Babel, and he declared, the Rav declared, Anohu ben Azai Dahach. By the way, Dahach means of here Israel. Because the Yerushalmi is writing it. I am like Ben Azai of Israel, which means Rav felt you can ask me any question you want. And perhaps there was Lefi Erech Rav's Madrega. There's some sort of feeling of he's being pretentious, he's being a little bit too show off. Perhaps he was punished to a certain degree. What happened was Asa Chatzov. In the Bavli, we know from a Tosfos that an elder is Eliyahu Hanavi. Whether it's the same in the Yerushalmi, I have no idea. But we don't know who, but it was an elder. Yeah, I can ask you anything you want. Osa Chatzov and Shalei. And this was the kasha. Now we're going to go into a little bit of Daf Dalet. Shnei Harugim Zel Gabzed. The case that we just spoke out, you found two murdered victims. One is on top of the other. And the problem is, the challenge is that the upper one is closer to City 8. The lower one, the bottom one is closer to City B. The question is, either, both, none. What do you do? So Rav responded based on his svarim that both have to bring. Why did Rav say that? So let me already say, because Rav holds min b'minoi einoi choitzes. And therefore, like we spoken in the introduction, that it's called tamun. If a body is tamun, a murdered victim, there's no din of eglaru. You can't say the bottom one is tamun because he's being covered by another corpse. The din of tzaf, when the Torah says basada, it's basada. It's not physically on the basada. It doesn't matter. It's a min b'minoi. It's like it's on the sada. Because of min b'minoi and a chaytzitz, both have to bring. Now you have two corpses. Each one has another city. Both have to bring. That was his answer. And Amalei, the old man, told him, you got it wrong. Einoirfin. Einoirfin means no city has to bring. Let's read inside the Marafulda, top Marafulda. Sabarav Shem Orfin, Litarvayum, Waidedin. For Orfin Lu Eglarufa. Why is it that we measure from the Elyon? The Elyon is not Basad, it doesn't matter. Why do we measure from the Tachtain? There's a din of Tamun. It's only if they are found exposed, not if they are found hidden. It's not hidden. However, he argued, we know you're wrong. That litarvayu for both of them ain't orphan. Number one, min b'minoi korinelu tamun. So it's tamun. Yeah, tamun means it's hidden, and also it's called saf. It's floating. And the tamun with saf in the case where halachically everyone, if there would be an agreement that it's either or, in each case tamun or saf is mimatin hasam mikroi delo yarfin lahu. Now the Marafulda says, why are we bachal bringing it over here? Which is nikrat sof afilu leke mishum shura ein shikha the loikorinan bei basada. He's saying another layer over here that even though we spoke about shura, let's speak about the topper of the fourth. The topper of the fourth is not basada. Okay, let's leave it at that. I'm gonna go back to this end of Marafulda, the connection. But let's come back. What happened? So that's what the Sava told. Let's read it inside. Amalei Lama, the Rabbi engaged with him. So we just read this in the Marafulda. So he answered the Sava. Amalei, the elder, tells Rav, I'll tell you. Tachtoin is excluded from the whole thing because it's Tamun. The Elyon is Mishum Tzaf, as we just explained. Now, That was it. That was the end of the conversation. Yeah, ask you anything? I asked you. I disagree with you. So when Rav came back to Eretz Yisrael, so he went then. His Rebbe was still alive. Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Also legabe Rebbe, and he wanted to know from Rebbe what's the din. So Amalei Rebbe told him that like this. You gave the wrong answer. In other words, you got your humility. Elama that Yos Amalach. He said that they are both excluded, but not because of his rationale. The Saba held min b'minoi is chaytzitz. Rebbe told Rav, you're right, that min b'minoi ain't a chaytzitz. Elama. So why is the psak din of that Saba correct? Why are they both excluded? Why is no egla rufa? Why does none of them have to be brought? That's something else. Because since the pasuk in Parsha Shoiftim begins, ki yemotze chalol ba'adama, ki yemotze means you found a corpse, but the Torah uses the word in the singular, ki yemotze v'loy ki yemotzu. That's a whole different reason. Since it was two, so therefore it's excluded. So the Sava was right, but not your reasoning was right, and his psak din, but his psak din was right as well. Now let me just feed us like this. The bottom line is since min b'minoi einoi choitzitz, Rebbe accepts the psak of Rav, min b'minoi einoi choitzitz. So therefore, the Gemara is authenticating the inquiry. We're not resolving the inquiry. That when you leave the Elyon, right? We stated the pasuk by Shikha, Basada, like the Mara folder brought down. It's still considered Basada. It was laying on other grains. The question is now it's on a support. Now it's on a support. I don't know how to learn it. Maybe you can argue that maybe it's a conclusive resolution to the Baya that min b'minoi is a chaytzis. But now that you took out the tachtoin, so what do you put it on? You put it on some sort of support system. So it's not basada. It's not basad tzaf. Unlike the case of the Baya where one corpse was laying on another corpse. Here, the top that you left is no longer laying on a bundle. You found some other something and you put it on top of that. Maybe that's like a resolution. Since it's not basada, like you have Boadama, since it's not basada, so therefore it's not a shura. It's not a shura, then all three become shikha. Maybe that's like the resolution. All right, to be continued.
How do we define